end up joining. So just a quick round of introductions. Hi, I'm Kim Reese, co-founder of Periscopic. This is our first ever Ask Us Anything here at Periscopic. We're going to just try it out, see how it goes, and hopefully we'll be doing some more in the future. I would like to introduce some of our team members. We're doing a QA on a major project right now, so we have limited people who are available. In fact, these two probably shouldn't even be here right now. But without further ado, this is Santos Kash. He is our technical director. Do you want to say anything about yourself?
Not really, no.
He's like, that says it all.
Yeah, I guess I said everything. This is Hui. He is one of our front-end developers here. And Kay Watson, who is our designer, who is also part of the big project that we are pushing right now. So everybody's been working hard on that, and so thank you all for making the time today to do this. So just a little bit of background on how this works. If you are in, so Google Hangouts should have a little side panel. If you roll over, there should be a Q&A little app that you can select that will let you ask questions, and then we can sort of take people's questions and answer them as they come in. We're recording this, so it will appear on our YouTube channel shortly. We have some construction going on, so we'll be hearing random noises.
Perfect timing.
Perfect timing, yes, knock knock. We're going to try to limit this to about 30 minutes just to try it out this time and see how it goes. So it's open to whatever you'd like to ask us about. It could be data related, it could be tech related. We have two tech people, we have a designer, so feel free to ask anything pertinent to that, as well as anything that you're thinking about in terms of visualization. A couple of things I'd like to mention. We have a couple of job openings, so if anybody's interested in being a lead designer or project manager, please drop us a line, go to our website and check out the job descriptions, and you can find out more there and send us your resumes. We have a new newsletter that we just started, so we have a couple of issues out. You can sign up. We'll be posting links along with the video afterwards, so you can grab this, but it's just the URL is tinyletter.com/periscopic. And then again, we're going to be doing more of these. We'll probably be doing them maybe once a month or once every couple of months, and we have some fun special guests we hope to rope in, and so it'll be exciting, and we'll have fun topics for future ones. This one is just sort of an open call just to see what people are interested in. So so without further ado, we have collected some questions ahead of time, and so I'm going to just start off with asking those questions. I'm going to sort of pick on people here to jump in and prod them to answer some of these questions. So the first question we got was from somebody who is just starting out in data visualization. They want to sort of dive into a professional career in data viz. They have environmental planning and design and GIS background, and they want to know some more about it. So they have a few questions that they've listed here. One of them, I think, perfect for you, Santos, is they would like to hear more about APIs and what their importance is in visualization or the management of data. They have, this person has little understanding what APIs are, so maybe you could go into some background about that and talk a bit about how we use them or how they're used, just sort of globally.
Sure. So I think in general, the intent of APIs is to be able to provide access to data in a manner that's understandable and used across different for different purposes. So we ourselves create APIs mostly for internal consumption. A lot of our visualizations ultimately are, they're representing visually a lot of data, and we'll create APIs that ultimately filter a lot of that data so that our front-end engineers will make a call to say, hey, I need a particular set of data, and I'll be like, you make a call to an API, and an API then processes, goes through tons and tons of data, and ultimately just gives back the data that's relevant based on that API call. Now, in general terms, we consume APIs just like anybody else would, and we create APIs, again, as I mentioned, mostly for our own internal consumption. In the future, we're hoping to create API for open data sets out there so that people can actually start, leveraging some of that information. But I think ultimately the intent of APIs is just, as I mentioned earlier, making data accessible by various sources. So when you create an API, it doesn't necessarily have to be just for one purpose. It can be for multiple things. So for example, if you have a web application, a mobile application, some other thing that only uses an aspect of that data set as opposed to the whole thing. So that's mostly the intent of APIs, and I think it's good to get familiar with the basics. For example, you could just write a little script that reads that connects to, like, let's say a Facebook API or a Twitter API. There's a lot of online documentation on that, and that sort of will get your feet wet in terms of being able to consume APIs and understand the basic concept of sort of how to work with APIs. And then after that, you can sort of start thinking about creating your own API, which sounds difficult, but actually isn't. And you'll find out as you develop APIs that the difficult aspect of it is the data analysis component of it, going through data and trying to determine what aspect of it makes sense for you to sort of encapsulate within an API call.
Awesome. Are there any specific languages or?
No, at this point in time, APIs can be written in almost any language. I mean, we tend to use PHP, but Java does it as well. You could technically create an API through JavaScript if you wanted to. So language is not necessarily a limiting factor for API development, and I think that shouldn't be something that you should concern yourself with. I think ultimately it's whatever you're comfortable with. We'll have some sort of library or some sort of component that will enable you to either consume and or create an API.
Awesome. I also just ran across somebody just on Twitter today mentioned a tool for connecting to lots of different APIs, and it basically lets you connect from Excel to any sort of public API. I forget what it is. I'll post it in the links. I think it's called like Brightscope. I can't remember. I'll post it in the links afterwards. But that seemed some kind of interesting way to go about it if you're just sort of getting your feet wet in APIs as well. So another question that came in was how the person's only worked on static visualizations, but they're very interested in the possibility of interactivity. So they're wondering where's a good place to start from moving from static to interactive visualization. Hui, do you have some ideas on like jumping into the world of programming or moving from just static design into interactive? What thoughts on that?
So if the person already has a static side, so as soon as it has a reasonable command of HTML, maybe a little bit of CSS, maybe not a lot of JavaScript. So I would say interactivity has a lot to do with JavaScript. So that's a good place to start. JavaScript is can be a tricky language to pick up. So make sure you understand the fundamentals of it first. And a very good place to start is to read the book by Crawford, JavaScript in Good Parts. I feel like no one's really allowed to program JavaScript unless they have finished that book. So it points out a lot of the ugly parts of JavaScript, and you can avoid those parts. It's a pretty language to work with. In terms of interactivity,
How about any libraries? Are there any kind of specific libraries that might be a good the way to use them in?
There's a, if you want to just like show a high certain parts of a website, jQuery is a good like starting point. If you want to have like high lots of animation, constantly redrawing a website, like easel or canvas, a good option. If you just want to, if you want to just have to add like simple animations to your existing graph, maybe E3 is not a bad place to look. Those are pretty simple options to start.
Awesome. And then Kate, from your perspective, in terms of moving from static to interactive, that's sort of a big creative leap. What are do you have tips for helping people sort of make that mental switch?
Yeah, I think a good way to look at it is if you have all of your static information in front of you, start thinking about how you can simplify the amount of information that's on the page or screen at a time, and you can sort of, I guess, take some of that extra information that might not be necessarily needed at first glance and make it more accessible through interaction within context of specific elements. So if you have very specific information relating to a very specific graphic, then maybe you don't show that right away. You just reveal it when the user decides that they interact with the elements, ergo they're interested in knowing more about that individual element. So I think that just looking at it through the mindset of how can I simplify the information that I have in front of me and sort of phase out the amount of information that the user has access to through interactivity.
I'd like to add one thing, that even though JavaScript is indeed fundamentally difficult to learn, we don't want to discourage anybody from learning it. I think ultimately if you put the time and effort and desire to be good at it, you'll succeed. And as Huey mentioned, I think once you got to a point where you feel comfortable with JavaScript and you have a good fundamental understanding of data visualization, playing around with the D3 library is a good starting point. There's a lot of online tutorials for you to get started and sort of being able to create sort of basic interactive data visualization pieces. So taking something from an infographic to something that comes a bit more alive. So. And then some of the elements that you mentioned, which is the canvas and the HTML5 and the jQuery, that's when you go beyond the D3 and sort of expand from that, from something that's basic to something that's more complex and very, very much customized. And you're not limited by a particular library. But D3 is a beautiful library. We love it.
Awesome. Okay, so another question was, is there one program we use to manage large sets of data? No. So the way we the way we work, we don't, I think it would be different if we were a corporation or organization where we had one set of data, or like a warehouse of data or a data lake, whatever. Then we would have sort of infrastructure for that scenario. The way we work, we have specific clients who come to us with lots of different data formats and data infrastructure of their own, so we have to adapt to whatever our clients are using typically. But in terms of what we've seen out there for people who are managing large amounts of data, that we still see relational databases. I think there's still a use for them. I think that's fine. There gets to be a point where you're sort of pushing at the edges of what they're capable of. So, once you get above, 5-10 million rows, then you start, thinking maybe there's a better way of doing this. Anytime you see a sort of a performance lag, you want to start assessing your options as far as like moving up to the next tier. We've worked with Google BigQuery a few times, which is a really fast, fun, easy tool to use. We've really enjoyed that. Sandra, are there other ones that we've been?
Yeah, I think ultimately, the intent of an agency like our company, like Periscopic, is that we need to be technology agnostic, and an aspect of being technology agnostic implies that we need to be comfortable dealing with any database, whether it's relational or not, whether it's, something that runs in the cloud or not. But anyways, so for example, we do a lot of things with Postgres, we do a lot of things with MySQL, we do a lot of things on AWS, and there's sort of, I think it's called RDS, and of course Google has their equivalent, which is, Big Table and all that. So again, ultimately, we work with, you name it, we probably have done it. But I think ultimately for us, we tend to not shy away from anything because, we don't care what data you're using or I'm sorry, what database you're using. Our job is to try to figure out and tell a story from the data, irrespective of where it resides. So, yeah.
Sorry. Just turn on some lights since it's getting a little dark here. So we have another question come in about, we've been doing this for 12 years now, and so someone's wondering about, what our thoughts are in the future of data viz, where things are headed. I guess I'll take that one first, and then you guys can jump in. Yeah, it's really interesting to see where things have gone the past 12 years. When we started out, there was, it was hard to explain what data visualization was, and then really in the last 5 years or so, it's become, very trendy, and now it's gotten very serious. I think people are starting to take it extremely seriously, realize its potential, realize its impact, and how important it is to their organizations, and how they are, how they sort of need it in across the whole pipeline of their work. So we've seen visualization go from sort of this destination where people would do analysis and research and what have you, and then call us up at the end of all of that and say, here, put a pretty picture on our analysis. So it's changed now from being the pretty picture at the end to like, let's include it throughout our process, throughout our research, make sure that we're gathering the right data, make sure we're validating our findings, making sure that when we do get to our communications or whatever the end goal is, that we're setting visualization up for success at the end of it. So that's been really exciting to see it mature in that way. I think that there are a lot of places where machine learning can be used in visualization. I think that's sort of the next wave, is applying another level of intelligence into visualization, and not just have visualization be the standalone object. So those are areas that I think we're looking at. We're seeing more exciting things. We're seeing a lot of more useful visualizations come out, not just this sort of fancy flowery stuff. So really focusing on utility. We're seeing a lot more things in terms of tools coming up. So, tools for visualization, tools for data gathering, tools for data science, tools for all sorts of things. So that area I think is still very nascent, and it'll be interesting to see how that shakes up in the next 3 years or so, to see what really sticks and enables us to do better work. Any other thoughts from you all?
No, I think you covered a lot, and you definitely touched on something I think we're seeing a lot more of, is just creating efficient tools that focus on the utility of this data and making sure that it's efficient for long-term use. We have a lot of clients that seem to want to transform these visualizations into something they can use in the future to bring reports to meetings and things like that. So repurposing the data visualization in a modular way for different discussions and future topics.
And I think an element that's going to be critical. You going to say something?
Was that dashboarding?
Yeah, exactly. Stuff like what you're doing, like PSF. It seems like more of that tends to be a thing things like that, where they want to have a tool that will not only show you the state of their data, but be built in a way that can be modularized for other purposes, you know, of reporting.
Yeah, I think an element that's going to be critical in terms of informing how data visualization sort of grow in into the future is the fact that we're collecting a lot more data now, and we as human beings are becoming more comfortable with these things collecting all this data. So, for example, like like the Nike Run tool thing, everybody's constantly posting, hey, this is where I ran, right? And it's a way to visualize data in a manner that people can sort of grasp very quickly. But anyways, the point is that as we are collecting more and more data, the more data that we have to play with, it enables us to actually get additional ideas, additional sort of ways of thinking how that data could be visually represented. So the more data points that we have, the more possibilities there are, and therefore that ultimately I feel is going to influence, the direction in one way or another, but towards the future of data visualization. And I think people are starting to get data visualization. They're starting to understand, hey, there's a lot of complex data there, but it's easy for me to understand in this data visualization. And I think ultimately people are just comfortable with that now. So.
Awesome. Okay, we have time for a couple more questions. So one's come in, and I wish that Brett, our other front-end engineer, was here because he would have some definite thoughts on this. So we'll just answer it quickly and as best we can, but hopefully in the future, maybe in a future Ask Us Anything, Brett will be available to, what's the word, expound? Elaborate.
Some word.
Some word that means talk a lot about these things, because I know he's passionate about some of these things. So what are our thoughts on things like WebGL, game-like immersive data presentation or exploration, VR, AR, direct manipulation, and other frontiers highlighted by Brett Victor? Blah, blah, blah. So Brett Victor, we love Brett Victor. So I have a couple of thoughts on that. I don't know specifics to some of those technologies. But yeah, I think all of those areas are rich areas to explore as far as data visualization goes. I think VR is going to be huge. I know there are a number of our competitors out there. I hate to say competitors because it's a very close-knit group of very supportive people, but there are some people that we know of who are doing a lot of experimentation in that area, and I think that's a very rich area to be explored. I think Brett Victor has some really fascinating ideas about like direct manipulation, immediate gratification of seeing what you're coding. So I think visualization has the same capabilities as some of the things that she's showing with programming. So again, also lots of areas to explore. I know even people at Tableau who are big fans of Brett Victor. So I'm hoping that they can use some of his ideas and really bring that type of interaction to life. Any other thoughts on those areas?
That was a lot of things that you rattled off there.
I know.
I can't remember what they all were. So,
again, we'll add links to the video on YouTube. So, with thoughts and books and other resources that we think of along the way. But we'll move on quickly to another question, because I know we're also running out of time. I want to make sure to get to everybody. And sorry, I have to move close to the screen to read these because they're showing up kind of small. I think this one is, okay, we're down here. This is an interesting question. So it says, what's our process of ideation? Sorry for this word, I think it's a great word. We use it all the time. The exploration and narrowing of the design space, identifying and possibly rejecting or somehow taking risks with novel designs and arriving at one or two proposals for a given purpose. I'm gonna let Kay start this since she's sort of heads that section up.
Okay, so there are a lot of things that influence the ideation process, the brainstorming process really early on. And we're usually in front of a whiteboard with a marker and just throwing out everything that comes to our mind based off of the little knowledge we have of what we will be working with. Usually this happens without the developers involved, so we're making a lot of assumptions without knowing the technology we will be using or the budget we will have. So it's nice in a sense that we're not limited by those things at first. It's nice to start from a place of like, you know, what could we do if we could do anything? And then sometimes, you know, we get to the point where this information starts to filter in based off of the client needs, who our audience is, the technology we're restricted to, and we start filtering down to what we can do. And, you know, it's just such an iterative process of like making sure that I keep such verbose notes. Everybody knows that I take a notebook with me everywhere. I have one right here and I write down everything just because I want to make sure that we're constantly going back to ideas or testing things out that we have clearly made assumptions on without knowing for sure if it will work, and just making sure, okay, at the appropriate time, we want to test out this theory. Right now, we want to pitch it as something that we think would be really cool and see where we can go from there. But eventually we'll need to test it out. And so it just really requires a lot of note-taking and information organization from a personal level and an internal level, and a lot of communication. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the note-taking, it's really interesting. Sometimes I'll pass by Kay's desk and she'll just have a notebook just full of sketches and notes about a project. It's really exciting to see that. So that, I think, is probably the key, is being comfortable sketching ideas. So you don't have to be great at drawing. You don't have to be, you know, you don't have to show them to anybody. That's the thing, you know. It just has to be a way for you to organize your thoughts as far as like visually what kind of ideas come up. And you don't have to have real data either. I mean, it makes it more difficult, I think, sometimes if you don't have the actual data and you're just working conceptually. But it also gives you a certain level of freedom.
And it brings up those questions as you're doing that, like, ooh, well, I have this idea, but I know what I want to check to see if it will work. It sort of gives you a blueprint of things that you want to make sure you check the data against when you actually do get the data, or questions you want to ask the developer once you do get to that process. So ideation is much more than just conceptualizing the visuals. It's more of just trying to create a roadmap for testing out ideas in all of these different departments throughout the process of the project.
Yeah, another thing I want to touch on is sort of the counter of what Kay does. She's a visual designer and an interaction designer. Our data person will often start with the data or start with sample data or some dummy data, and start from that very sort of rooted way of looking at the project. And so they will end up working very closely together, sort of playing off of each other's ideas and just seeing what works and what doesn't. And I think one thing that you can't really underestimate is like having the safe space to toss those ideas around. It's something that you have to, one, as managers, you have to sort of create that space, or as people who are leading the organization, you have to create a space where people can feel safe to just throw out crazy ideas, because that's usually where the best ideas come from. There's some crazy space where somebody's saying some ludicrous thing and everybody laughs, but then in the end it sort of comes around back to that crazy idea of like, hey, well, what if we took that crazy idea and like did this with it and actually made it feasible? Those types of things come up all the time. And so one, you have to create the safe space, but two, you also have to be comfortable as someone who is creating those ideas. You have to feel comfortable with, hey, people are going to laugh at this. People are going to look at me crazy, and you just have to, have that fortitude to step in there and throw your crazy idea in. And that's where all of our best ideas come from, I think. It's just that space where we're all tossing out just weird ideas. And what if we did this, or what if we did that, or, what have you. So that's the process. I think in terms of the actual, how we get from A to B, there's a lot of interplay between the data scientists and the designers to sort of test the waters of like what's feasible or what's what's engaging, what's compelling, what is succinct and tells the story, what is, how do we get the point across without overwhelming people. So there are a lot of things that come into play, and it's a lot of sketching and a lot of data work. Our tools in the data science side are, we do a lot of ideation in Tableau. We use that as sort of a sketchpad for data ideas, and then pass those ideas along to Kay, who will either sketch or to start working in Illustrator. So I see we have a couple more questions that we can try to finish up on. Let's see here. Okay, this one we answered already. And okay, well, so I think this might be our maybe final question. So what deadlines do you usually undertake from exploring the needs for a given project to publishing or delivery? Okay, so I think the question is, what kind of deadlines do we work under? It's different, it varies from project to project. We've worked on, very short turnaround projects, usually in the publishing world, unfortunately, to much longer projects. We've had projects that last up to a year or more. It really depends on what the goals are for the project, how expansive it is. Is it a visualization tool? Is it just a communications piece? It really depends also, on how many people are involved. A lot of it has to do with our clients and what kind of timeline they're under. But yeah, I would say the shortest has been probably 4 to 6 weeks, and the longest a year or more, depending on what's going on and what disciplines are involved. Okay, one last question. Oh, this is a good one. Yes, this is a good one to end on. I'm gonna let everybody answer this in their own way. Do you find it difficult to do socially conscious work, as it is often associated with lower or no financial compensation? Oh, actually, I didn't read the end of that. So I can answer the financial compensation side, but I think also a bigger question is, and we do get asked this often, is it, it's often kind of depressing work to work on. It's very, a lot of this is very troublesome data and stories that we have to tell. So I'm going to let everybody sort of give their take on how it feels to work with the types of projects we work on, and then I'll talk about financial compensation at the end.
So I think for me, I come from the advertising space, and I did that for 15 years. And I think after 15 years of realizing that my work wasn't being, emotionally and it wasn't something that I got a lot of joy out of. Financially, it was great, but I think ultimately after 15 years, you can only take so much, and I felt like my talent was being wasted. And I wanted to do something that I felt passionate about. And I think, being able to work at a company like Periscopic, whose motto is, being so consciously thinking about doing good, is something that I wanted, aligns with my perspective with what I wanted to do. And I wish I would have felt this way long time ago, like 5 years into my career as opposed to 15 years into my career. But I think ultimately, compensation is just one aspect of work. I think ultimately you have to be at a place that you enjoy the peers, the people that you're working with, that it challenges you, that is something that ultimately you can tell your parents about and your family or your friends, and they'll understand. So I think ultimately for me, Periscopic is all those things. And for me that trumps, making $40,000 more or something like that somewhere else. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't mean to dissuade you from answering the compensation question. I think it's great for all of us to give our take on that as well. So, Reid, do you have thoughts?
This is my first job in college, so I can't really compared to my previous jobs, but it's good that I'm working on workers make hopefully a better place. I think a better place for sure. I go back home, it'll sit easy like that. Like work, it doesn't matter anymore. Also, I think it's a good place, small company. So, and also we're not. I think I really like is that we're not stuck with all latest technology. We're always using the latest technology. So that's really good for children.
Yeah, I think the socially good aspect is really what inspires most of us to do the type of work we do. I mean, data visualization is great, but having that extra incentive and that sort of emotional draw to the content that you're working with is, it's a nice feeling, and I can't imagine like working for a company that doesn't have those same values. We have had, we've been lucky enough to have had some responses from clients that we've worked with that showed us how they've used our piece to share with others. We had a piece for the IAVA, the Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, and they showed us footage of them showing an interactive installation using our tool with veterans and families of veterans. And it was, I don't know, just seeing other people use our tool in ways that we had never imagined, and witnessing that emotional connection to that content is very rewarding. And I think we're pretty lucky to be working in an environment that allows for something like that.
Awesome. Yeah, I would echo all of that sentiment. I think it's incredible how, after doing this for 12 years, there are times when I sort of take it for granted, and then something will come along that sort of wakes me up. We'll get a call from a potential client who isn't such a do-gooder, and it'll be like, oh, wait, wow, I could be working for you and I don't have to, that's great. So being selective in that space is really great, and to create a company that can be focused on that, so that people with these shared ideals, all these great talented people that we have with us who we can all share those values and make hopefully be making the world a better place is wonderful. As far as compensation goes, yes, it's hard. It's hard mostly because we can't pay our employees as well as say a Google could, and Portland is starting to become the tech scene. It's like a baby San Francisco here, and so there's a lot of competition for talent, and it's becoming more and more difficult to compete with that. So that's very frustrating because we don't have those huge budgets. We're not made out of gold. So that's tough. But the other side of it too is that it's tough when we can't take on every project. There have been some really, really wonderful potential projects that just, we can't do pro bono work every day. So it's difficult when something really, there's that hard choice to make of, do we do pro bono, do we do another pro bono project or a very low paying project, or how much can we give this organization so that they can communicate their findings or their research, those types of things. So it's always difficult to work with organizations who don't have the funding. So trying to find alternative ways to help those organizations is really a top priority for us. We've ended up open sourcing a couple of our projects just so that they can be reused by other organizations. We've helped them get the open source code up and running. So we do some outreach in that respect, in that we, everything that we do, we're hoping that people can make use of. We've even had people apologize for stealing our code, and I said, please don't ever apologize for that. Please steal our code. We would love you to do that. If you can make use of anything that we've done, we'd love it, as long as it's making progressive change in the world. But yeah, it's tough when you see, these massive corporations who are doing, very little good in the world, who can spend money for whatever they want, and you see these amazing organizations who don't have the funding to do just basic outreaches. It's hard. But we do what we can. We try to get creative solutions for organizations whenever we can. And I think it's also great that the field is becoming, there are a lot of new people in the field, lots of hackathons going on, lots of places like DataKind that are doing, they have free resources for organizations. So there are a lot more resources now than there used to be, which is fantastic. So we can always, connect people with with different resources around for data science or visualization on a tight budget. So that's been great to see that progress. I know there are a bunch of more questions coming in. It is getting late in the day. Maybe we'll take just one more quick one if I can. Oh, thank you. Some nice compliments here. I think we might have gotten to all of them, actually. So great. I think we got to everybody. Thank you so much for coming to this and being a part of our first ever Periscopic. Let's go anything.
Thank you.
So yeah, please stay tuned on Twitter and LinkedIn and wherever else you find our information. Look on YouTube for our links. I'll probably also tweet it from both my account and from Periscopic account, so that all of the things that we mentioned, books and resources and what have you, will link to those and hopefully get people on the right track. And but please also feel free to contact us outside of Google Hangout. We love emails and tweets and what have you. So please be in touch. Any last thoughts?
Go out and do some good.
Do good. All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.